think about China's industrial rise, what comes to mind? Probably AI, robots, EVs, and maybe solar panels. But there is one sector that's a lot less visible, but could end up affecting far more lives than any of those. Pharmaceuticals. Well, CNA Correspondent's latest offering shows that China is no longer just churning out generic drugs. It's now helping drive the next generation of treatments, especially in cancer. And the world is sitting up and starting to take notice. So how did China move so quickly into cutting-edge drugs? And what does that mean for the rest of us? I'm Otelli Edwards, and CNA's senior correspondent Tanya Guan, he joins us now. And Guan, first up, tell us, I know that this piece took quite a fair bit of time, epic effort, if we could say it as that. Can you just walk us through how it all came together?
Well, I wouldn't say it's epic effort, but it did take about half a year to make. The first interview actually goes back to September last year. In fact, the first person I approached was not originally going to be used in the pharma documentary at all. That was not my intention. It was someone I was speaking to in the context of the then upcoming 15 5-year plan, because I wanted his perspective as an investor on where China's economy might be heading. His name was William Ma. He is the founder and Global Chief Investment Officer of Grow Investment Group. I knew before speaking to him that China's pharma sector was emerging to be a force to be reckoned with, but it was William that really opened my eyes that China's pharma is emerging within a very different environment from pharma industries elsewhere. And this was what he said to me.
Private equity fund is a time machine in which they would invest in future, 5 to 10 years ahead of the public market and secondary market. If you wind the clock back, actually 10 years ago, a lot of Chinese and global private equity company already put a lot of money in this biotech pharmaceutical sector, and this is a really important and solid sector, and I would say strategic sector from the Chinese government and global, investor, if you like. So I would agree, potentially, if there is a second DeepSeek moment for the Chinese economy, would be a breakthrough of the biotech or pharmaceutical sector. But having said that, my view is this would be a commodity. This would be a social welfare. If you look at the prioritization of the 15th, 5-year plan, general wealth, living standard, equality, of the retail people is on the agenda and highest priority. So as an investor, I would invest in those companies, but I would not expect they are able to make a really high profit margin, because I think this is a social welfare issue.
So Otelli, after hearing what he said, it hit me that the pharma sector in China would be very interesting to look at, because here we have a pharma sector growing in a market economy with distinct socialist roots, especially when it comes to healthcare. In the West, pharma companies are rewarded with handsome profits when they come up with a new drug, and many plow these profits back into R&D to make even more new drugs and future profits. But if the government wants those drugs to reach as many people as possible, what happens to your profits? And if there aren't handsome profits to be gained, then what happens then to drug innovation? These are the questions that I attempt to answer in the 3-part news feature that has now been extended into a half-hour CNA Correspondent episode that you can catch on CNA Insider YouTube channel.
Okay, but come on, Guan, don't leave us hanging there. You've got the hook now. You got to at least give us a sneak peek. What can we expect? And I guess especially what stood out for you?
Okay, suffice to say, in a nutshell, drug innovation hasn't stopped in China. Instead, it has pulled ahead. Globally, almost half of new drugs in the testing pipeline now originate from Chinese labs. So don't be surprised one day you might have your life extended by a new drug that originated from labs in China.
So clearly that's one of the things that really stood out. But I have to say, Guan, China isn't exactly the first place people think of when it comes to cutting-edge medicine. So when you started reporting this, what story did you expect to find, and how did all of that perhaps change along the way?
True that. When I first went in, I was expecting a story mainly about, China's edge in manufacturing and bring costs down. Those things are still part of it. China is still very good at scaling up, very good at speed, very good at engineering. But what surprised me was that many people inside the sector now think that the story has moved on beyond the fact that they can make drugs cheaply. The argument now is that we can make better drugs too. And it's a bit like what happened with electric vehicles. When China combines its industrial scale, engineering depth, and cost advantages, they can come up with better and cheaper products. And surprisingly, this can be applied to pharmaceuticals too.
And I mean, if you look at it, Guan, as a whole, right, help us understand how does it all work? I mean, applying the success of China's EVs to pharma, for instance.
Well, one of the clearest explanations actually came from John Chu of Duality Bio, a Chinese biotech firm. He says biotech can be split into two parts. The bio side, meaning the underlying biology. In the case of cancer, for example, is about finding the target protein for your drugs to latch on. Then there's the tech side. That means that after you find the target, how do you attack it? That's where it gets a bit technical, I'm afraid. I try my best to explain it with graphics in my documentary. But here in this podcast, we can understand it as you need your drug to release its chemotherapy bomb of sorts at the right time, at the right place, with the right toxin. And for that, you need chemistry and engineering. Then you need to scale it up to mass produce this drug. John argues that's where China has become very strong. John says that China's rise in biotech is partly down to government encouragement, partly down to overseas returnees coming back, and partly down to years of accumulation. In his words, it allows an entire industry cluster to take shape. Because according to John, for drug development, you don't just need scientific talent. You need talent that can translate science into real drugs and has the energy to keep up. Here's John Chu, founder and CEO of Duality Biotherapeutics.
要一个敏锐的嗅觉，因为这个 biotech 发展真是日新月异。
You need a sensitive nose because biotech develops incredibly fast, day by day. If someone doesn't read papers for a year and a half, they can be out. And you not only need to understand science, you need to know how to translate that science into medicine. That's not easy. University professors understand science very well, but when they come out to make drugs, that's a different thing. How to translate it matters.
这是两个不同的事情，所以怎么去 translate 这个很重要。
Otelli, you know one fun fact. John Chu himself may be the boss of a biotech company, but he's actually not a practicing scientist in the true sense of the word.
Okay, so hold up here. John, not quite a scientist. Then help us, then what is his background? And I guess how credible is he then?
Well, before Mr. Chu founded Duality Bio, he was actually a VC or venture capitalist for more than 10 years. That said, he does have some science background. Here he is again explaining to me how he started out and why he decided to take a big pay cut to set up his own firm.
Actually, I got my PhD in biochemistry in US and worked in Silicon Valley for a few years, get my MBA from UC Berkeley, came back to Shanghai in 2006 to join a biotech startup. When the company went IPO, I somehow went to the dark side, become a VC for more than 10 years. So during that time, I not only invest, we also incubate the company. When I say incubate the company, is that we load the business plan, we assemble the pipeline, and we also assemble the management team. And when that is set up, then we will hire professionals to become senior management. But I realized I really like the incubating part, and it's kind of unfair because I set up the companies. I've been there, I've done that. So maybe I can run the company myself, see how it goes.
So from John Chu, I got to understand that China can have the engineers, the chemists, even AI models. But to truly become a drug innovation powerhouse, China needs enough people who can connect all the dots and turn it into medicines that work, get approved, and reach the world. And John Chu is someone like that.
Okay, very, very interesting. Now, I want to pick up on Duality Bio. If my understanding is right, it's among a wave of Chinese biotech firms licensing out their drugs to all these global pharma giants. So, Guan, if the science is there, why aren't these companies actually going global under their own brands?
Well, that is really the central tension here. And one of the clearest explanations came from Dai Jialing of Pharma DJ, a platform that focuses on the Chinese pharma sector. Let's take a listen.
假如说用简单的话来讲，有两个反
If I put it simply, there are two fundamental reasons. One, the buyer has to have the willingness. Like I said, Big Pharma has that willingness. They are short of products. Second, Chinese companies, under volume-based procurement and domestic capital pressure, if they don't do out-licensing deals, they might not even survive. So it's about survival.
做这些 out license 的这些敌友的话，他甚至可能活不下去，所以他要 survival 下来。
So that is where we are now. Chinese pharma companies may be generating valuable assets, but they can't generate the handsome profits and capital appreciation needed to sustain the research, in part because volume-based procurement pushes down the valuation of their discoveries. Right. So, but outside of China, they find a ready market because to Western pharma, these new drugs that Chinese biotech firms are making are a bargain compared to discovering these drugs themselves. That is why Western pharmaceutical companies are paying such close attention. Here's Ray Lim with a view from Big Pharma. He's a former pharma executive with Western pharmaceutical firms and is now the founder of a networking industry platform called Pharmanex.
So, I wouldn't look at it as an acquisition. I would look at it as a co-development and at the very most as an investment from the Western companies. As to why is it so attractive, it boils down to 2 points. Number one, on the efficiency of development of drugs in China. One point that we can zoom in is when it comes to clinical trials, China does not have a problem with patient recruitment. As you can see, clinical trials, it's very important for us to have enough patients to test a particular drug. But because of huge domestic market, they can actually very, very easily, as compared to the rest of the world, have enough patients to go through clinical trials. That's number one. It's very efficient. Number two is it actually comes to market valuation. So the perception of China, is still very much a generic market. That's what the perception is. But in actual fact, China has actually moved beyond being a generics market.
Otelli, since we spoke to Ray, China's innovative drug sector has gone off to a blistering start this year, with deal making in January alone hitting nearly $35 billion. That's nearly a quarter of last year's total. But the real shift is where in the pipeline these deals are happening. In the past, global pharmaceutical companies typically bought late-stage drugs from China, assets that had already shown results in clinical trials. Now, they are moving much earlier into experimental, even discovery stage science. Take AstraZeneca is paying $1.2 billion upfront to partner China's CSPC Pharmaceutical, one of China's largest drug makers. And what are they paying for? They're paying for access to 8 obesity-related programs, most still in early development, mind you. And as well, they're also paying for CSPC's AI drug design platform and its long-acting delivery technology. In some cases, deals are happening even before a drug exists. Eli Lilly's partnership with Innovent Biologics, worth nearly $9 billion, was signed before specific molecules were developed, with Innovent effectively leading early-stage research. So instead of just buying drugs, global firms are now buying into China's R&D engine itself, sharing the risk earlier, but also gaining access to faster, lower-cost innovation. That marks quite a fundamental shift from late-stage licensing to early-stage co-development, and suggests that China is no longer just catching up in biotech, but is also helping shape what gets developed next.
Guan, it really sounds like China's pharma is moving fast and furious. But I want to touch on the policy side of things, because, this isn't just about market forces, right? There is a clear role for state planning being involved here as well.
Yes, it's been a long time in the making, but policy papers are so thick, some things do escape notice, especially in the beginning. Biomedicine is not brand new in Beijing's top-level planning language. The clearest national-level mention I could verify goes back to the 13th five-year plan in 2016, when China said it wanted breakthroughs in core technologies, including biomedicine. So this has been in a national planning conversation for about a decade. By the 14th five-year plan period, the official government material was already talking about accelerating the development of biomedicine as part of the bioeconomy push. What looks more significant this year is not the first mention, but the stronger wording. After this year's National People's Congress, the government work report described biomedicine as one of China's emerging pillar industries. That suggests a shift from just saying this is an area worth developing to saying this could be one of the industries that will help drive China's next phase of growth. So the market is moving in this direction, companies are moving in this direction, and the policy language, more importantly, is moving in the same direction too.
But Guan, I suspect this is quite a delicate balancing act for Beijing, because on one hand, the state wants all this cutting-edge drug innovation, but on the other, it wants medicine to remain affordable. So how does it all work?
Yeah, that's quite a contradiction, isn't it? And that's also a contradiction that runs through my series, and I try to explain it. And it really gets to the heart of the matter, because this pharmaceutical industry may become a strategically important industry, but it is also one tied to public health, aging, affordability, and social policy. So unlike some other sectors, success here may not simply mean maximum profits, it may mean maximum reach. That is also why I felt this was such a worthwhile story to do, because if China can apply its industrial strength to medicines in the way that it has applied them to other sectors, then the implications could be enormous. We have already seen what China can do with its manufacturing machine, right? In areas like EVs or consumer robotics, driving costs down, scaling production up fast, and broadening access to everybody. The big question now is whether some version of that could happen in pharmaceuticals too. And if it does, then this is not just about investors or scientists. This is about cancer patients, obesity patients, people with chronic diseases, families coping with costs, healthcare systems coping with aging. This is one of those sectors where industrial capability could eventually translate into social impact at a very, very large scale.
So your documentary, I believe, also touches on AI, but in a rather measured way. So in other words, does it mean that the state is not treating it as a silver bullet for drug discovery?
Well, the state is actually trying to apply AI to every single sector in the country, right? But of course, when it comes to pharmaceuticals, we're talking about life and death here. AI can assist in drug development. And in our documentary, we did speak at length with an AI scientist who's actually doing just that, right? But there is a reason why we're not seeing any AI-assisted drug in the market right now, right? That scientists point out to us that that's because drug development takes many, many years, right? But it's not, to him, right, it's not a matter of if, but a matter of when, right? Because AI is already helping the pharma sector in many ways, including very mundane but cost-effective ways. You can find out what that is in the documentary, because I don't think we have time to go into all of that.
Well, what we certainly have time is that Guan, I get the sense that you've just scratched the surface. There's still plenty to uncover. And I get the sense that this is not the end of the story for you just yet. So what's next?
Well, not at all. I mean, if anything, it feels like the beginning of a much bigger one, right? The documentary focused mainly on cancer drugs, licensing deals, and AI. There are also other fronts opening too, including weight loss drugs and a small number of Chinese companies that seem to be increasingly serious about becoming multinational drug makers on their own. Right. So I do not want to overstate that yet, but there is more to come from this sector and more to report. After all, I mean, earlier I mentioned, right, Western pharmaceutical drug companies are beginning to buy assets much, much earlier in the pipeline. And that already tells you a lot is happening in the Chinese pharma sector.
Well, I'm afraid we have run out of time. It is now time to wrap things up. Thanks, Guan, for coming on the pod.
Thanks for having me. The pleasure was all mine.
CNA's Tan Guan on China's rapid rise in the pharmaceutical world. It's a story that's about science, yes, but it's also about economics, policy, and your medicine cabinet. And if you have not yet watched his documentary on China's pharmaceutical industry, do look out for it on TV and on YouTube. Once again, thanks for joining me for this episode of the CNA Correspondent podcast. It's brought to you by Craig Dale, Clara Ong, Tiffany Ang, Net Fettelvero, Zikri Ayman, and me, Otelli Edwards. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.